hot topic for content creators. This is where I pitch a hot topic to you, and you turn around and create your own content on said topic. Why people read. And the subject for tonight's discussion is literary fiction. So I figure first things first, I'll just pull up the good old Wikipedia, and we'll get kind of a roundabout idea of what literary fiction is. So literary fiction, mainstream fiction, non-genre fiction. Now this comes from the Wikipedia. I wouldn't say literary fiction is mainstream fiction, but that's what they put in there. But anyways, literary fiction, non-genre fiction. That is accurate. Is non-genre fiction. Serious fiction or high literature, artistic literature, and sometimes just literature are labels that in the book trade refer to market novels that do not fit neatly into an established genre, or otherwise refer to novels that are character-driven rather than plot-driven. But I would put a little asterisk on that. They examine the human condition, use language in an experimental or poetic fashion, I'm going to get into that, or are simply considered serious art. All right, and that comes from the Wikipedia, just to kind of like set things up. Now, here's my take on it, or this is how I see it. So character-driven means stories that are focused on, say, character studies. So I have some examples here. So one, like a character study would be like The Catcher in the Rye. Some would say that this might be more of like a societal critique, but I don't know. I see this as more of a character study. A better example, though, and one that I read earlier this year would be Fyodor Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground. That one is hilarious, by the way. Definitely recommend that. Also, we have, so character, so it could be philosophical as well. So philosophical. Now, this one, I have an example of an author, one author that is both a good and bad example of philosophy in literature, and that is Ayn Rand. Now, I've read two books by Ayn Rand. One of her more famous ones, The Atlas Shrugged, and I also read Anthem. Now, the reason why I say she is both a good and a bad example of philosophy in literary fiction is both of these are examples of literary fiction, and it's a good example because it's clear to tell that philosophy is like the main aspect of the narrative. The philosophy is woven throughout the narrative. So it's very easy to tell that these books are written with a philosophical focus, if you will. Now, the how this is a bad example is that they are essentially big, long advertisements or marketing campaigns for Ayn Rand's philosophy, her personal philosophy, a philosophy that she claims that she created called objectivism, which effectively makes her novels vanity projects. But, you know, she typically gets, her work gets flack for that. This isn't to say that her works aren't entertaining. I do find there are, like, Atlas Shrugged is a very long novel, but it is entertaining, has its entertaining moments. You can definitely tell that it's like written through like a feminist fantasy kind of lens with the kind of love interests in there. And but it is very philosophically focused, and it's focused on her philosophy specifically. So basically, why that would be a bad example is because where I'm getting at is like, I'm under the impression that if you've read one book by Ayn Rand, you've basically read all of them, is basically what I'm getting at. Now, there's also, what else is literary fiction known for? Literary fiction, also known for political or social commentary. Okay, so narratives that offer political or social commentary. I have one. The Great Gatsby is a very well-known piece of work. And I'm trying to think of another one off the top, but I'll keep it with the Great Gatsby for now, because I do have other examples that I would like to bring up. Oh, well, I suppose I could say one that I have not read as of yet, but would probably fall under that, is the Iliad, for like the politics portion of it, because it has to do with like war, which I am looking forward to getting into this. However, this one does, I will say that this one does seem a little bit intimidating in terms of the content, but we'll see. We'll see. It's definitely more of like an academic type read. All right. So now let's get into some other aspects that kind of define literary fiction. So I have under here unconventional structure. So unconventional structure. An example of a novel that has unconventional structure would be The Evening Redness in the West, aka Blood Meridian, which is another novel that I checked off my bucket list earlier this year, and I really enjoyed that one. Highly recommend. But some other examples of like unconventional structure that literary fiction is known for would be like stream of consciousness works, avant-garde or poetic kind of works. And they may not follow the typical kind of 3-act structure or resemble any kind of like formula that typically defines genre fiction. Genre fiction is very formulaic, usually by definition. And if not by definition, usually, well, maybe not by definition, but definitely through criteria. The criteria that kind of categorizes a specific genre is usually pretty formulaic. There are certain tropes that are reoccurring, certain cliches, plot beats, what have you. So you have, on a side note here, one thing, if we're speaking of the difference between literary fiction and genre fiction, is that literary fiction is usually what I would say realistic depictions of fictional events that are meant to be taken literally. Not in the sense that they actually happened, but usually carry a more serious tone or to be observed in a kind of genuine way. So in other words, the purpose of it being more like, in other words, there's no, the concepts contained within the narratives are not usually hidden behind smoke and mirrors or any kind of thinly veiled metaphors of any kind. It's usually like right up front and center, and not to say that there isn't any kind of metaphorical meanings, but usually it's more of symbolism than metaphor, whereas genre is more like metaphor. But the purpose of the works are usually meant to be studied, discussed, analyzed, and or debated. So in other words, it's not entertainment just for the sake of entertaining. So literary fiction is not right to market. So unlike things like, think like pulp fiction, where pulp fiction is more like written with the intent of sensationalizing, or shock value or something like that. Literary fiction is written with intent. So as to say, these are authors who have something to say. The work has meaning and purpose that transcends the words on the page. Now, you may hear me saying that and you may think to yourself, well, that sounds kind of pretentious. And I may be inclined to agree on most instances, but only to a degree. Because if we cannot recognize artistic value beyond the level of entertainment we get from a piece of work, then the utility of the craft itself is reduced to being a creative means of either dulling or stimulating our base sensibilities. And if that's the case, then, why have human beings write literature? You just have at some point in time, AI will just be able to do that, right? Just push a button and you get funny story or feel good story or action story, right? But what do you guys think? Do you read any literary fiction?